yes, social media can be toxic. And if, when we were young, getting bullied in person, imagine how hard that would be for Gen Z getting bullied on the internet. Like if especially if they, let's say they have a lot of following. Like sometimes there's some like little Gen Z influencers. Actually, Gen Z is not even that like young like they used to be. What am I saying? They're like adults now.
Awekenge, this is Mental Matters, hosted by Asego Toto.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Mental Matters. I'm your host, Asego Dodo. And before we dive into today's incredible conversation, I have a small favor to ask. If you enjoy what you hear today, please take a moment to rate and review our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Your feedback not only helps us improve, but also helps others discover the valuable insights we share every week. And if you find today's episode particularly inspiring or insightful, don't forget to share it with your friends, family, or anyone you think could benefit from it. Thank you for your support. It truly means the world to us. Now, let's get back into our conversation. To kick things off, to someone that might be interested on of saying that of saying why did you start what you are doing? How did it start in terms of being a mental health advocate? Where did all it start?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you were mentioning before, I did experience a lot of childhood bullying, not just in childhood, but also like in college and such, and at home, and then just also in the workplace, there is bullying as well. So, I would say that when I was a senior in high school, I took a psychology class, and I was extremely fascinated there. And then I knew that when I was graduating high school, I was like, okay, I want to help people who are struggling with their mental health because I felt alone growing up. And then so I went to college. I have an went did an undergrad in psychology. And then as it hit like my junior year, I was thinking to myself, I'm like, okay, the traditional route to help people with their mental health is becoming a therapist. But then I realized I'm like, okay, I'm still struggling a lot with my mental health. I don't think I'm ready to have, patience. I feel like I'm end up crying with them, and that's not, professional.
Mm.
So at that time when I was a junior in college, I actually got accepted to the Disney College program. So that pretty much completely changed my path in life. So I moved to Florida, worked for Disney. But I was like, okay, I have a degree in psychology. What can I do with this? So I was like, maybe I can go into human resources and then I can help workers, have a good experience at work. And I did a couple of internships in human resources. And then I realized it really wasn't for me because what I want to do is I want to help the individual. But when you're working in human resources, of course, naturally you have to go by the rules and their policies. And it just didn't fit well with me. So at that time, I was like, okay, I really don't know how I'm going to do that, how I'm going to help. So I was just kind of going on with life. And then I knew that I wanted to work for Disney because I truly enjoy working for that company, and then also I was making magic, so I was really making people happy, and that gave me so much satisfaction and such. At that time, I was doing YouTube, so I was doing, like, comedy sketches and lifestyle, and what I found that helped with my mental health is, watching lifestyle videos, and it made me, feel like kinda like heard, there's a lot of relatability, and I felt less alone, and I was like, "Oh, I wanna do that," so I started a YouTube channel, and then over the years, I was building that channel, and I was like, "This is really fun, but I feel like I'm not doing anything really important." So I thought to myself, "What's important to me?" And then my brain went back to mental health, and I was like, "Okay, what can I do?" So I started, like, a mental health series on YouTube, and it didn't perform too well, so I was like, "Wait, podcasts are doing really well right now. Maybe people may not wanna watch me, but maybe they wanna listen to me." So I started the Mentally a Badass podcast, in 2021, and it was originally going to be me, talking about my struggles and giving advice, but then people wanted to be on my podcast to tell their story. And then from there, I had so many people wanting to tell their stories. I was like, oh, I'm doing something here. So then I created an Instagram account originally to post about the podcast, but then I started to have the courage to be vulnerable on there. And it actually did really well. I got like 20,000 views, 30,000 views, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, there's something here." So I realized, "Oh my gosh, social media, I'm supposed to be doing social media. This is how I'm gonna help people." And then I learned that I don't have to do it in a traditional setting, but I can still help people. I just don't have to do it the traditional way. And I ended up helping hundreds of people. They come into my DMs, they tell me how I saved their life and how they felt they didn't feel alone anymore. And then they'll come to me because they couldn't have anyone in their immediate circle. So that was like, okay, I'm actually making a difference here. So then everything was starting to make sense. And then so I have the podcast, and then I also just came out with a clothing line as well. So yeah, I would say that's pretty much my story when it comes to mental health advocacy, like where it started and kind of like where I am right
Mm,
now.
mm. What actually made you be actually confident then when it comes to sharing your story? Because sharing our story is one of the hardest things that you could do,
Mhm.
because one would say that they're afraid that people will look at them differently, people will actually know what they're struggling with. And what actually made it different for you to say, oh, let me do this? And you don't care, and you ended up having the mentality you don't care about what people say about you.
Yeah, I actually really, really like that question. I appreciate you asking it. So I would say that, helped me a lot with my confidence is when I started my YouTube channel. When I posted the first video, which the first video was actually giving advice to teenagers on how to get your first job. I was so anxious to post it because I was like, oh my gosh, people are going to judge me because I talk too fast. And all of my thoughts about, from being bullied was all coming to me. But then I was like, you know what? If I truly want to do this, I just got to go for it. And I believe from my memory, I posted a YouTube video when I was in high school and people made fun of me. So it kind of like I was super scared to do it when I was in college. But then I thought to my head, I'm like, you know what? I think what gave me the confidence to first put myself online was seeing an average person, just like anybody, putting themselves online. So I think what I guess helped me a lot is seeing other people tell their story. So I guess I'm really glad you asked me this question because I actually thought to myself too, like, what was it that made me okay to be vulnerable? And yeah, I would say that seeing people talk about their life was like, okay, I can do this. And at that time, like the internet didn't have as much hate as it does today. It still did, of course, but current day, it's actually just, like, getting a lot worse lately. So I was like, "Okay, I can do this." And then I just had to just really push through and just think, like, being confident within myself, and I took a lot of time out of high school to really work on myself. I surrounded myself with people who would uplift me instead of tear me down. When you're in high school, you're in pretty much a fishbowl. Then you don't really have as many. You can't really choose. I mean, you could choose your friends, of course, naturally, but it's a lot harder to choose your friends there than when you go out and become an adult. Because when you're in high
Definitely.
school, yeah, when you're like, grade school and high school, you're kind of just like figuring out yourself and you don't really know who you are. I mean, reality sometimes today you don't really know who you are, but definitely when you're in the developmental stages, it's really hard to see where you fit in. And then also when you're a teenager, you just want to fit in with people. In middle school as well. So that's like your worries that you have when you're in grade school. But then once you get out of high school and you meet people from all over, like I went to community college first. So I met people all over the county. So that's where it started there. And then I met people from all over the state when I went to college. And then another thing that really truly helped me was when I moved to do the Disney college program. I met people from all over the world and people were so kind to me. They were so nice to
Mm,
me. And I was like, wow, there's actually nice people out there, right? So I
mm,
was like, okay, it was definitely the environment that I grew up in that was just not good? So I
mm,
was like, let me just put myself out there. I had people in my life that really built me up, and I'm confident that I can, go online and tell my story. So when I did, my actually the first time I ever told my story was I would say maybe like 20. 2016, 2017, back when Instagram was just really photos. I would just do like kind of like a long paragraph about, what I struggle with, like bipolar and bullying. And I'll talk a lot about confidence, and I would do photo shoots, and I'll feel confident in my body. Like I did a lot of that. And then I got a lot of great feedback. So I would say that was the turning point, was when I was like, okay, I'm gonna put myself out there. That picture, that story, people's response, that was it. That was the turn. And then, just naturally, subconsciously, I just got more and more confident. And then be doing this podcast, and I just kept getting great feedback. Of course, naturally, you're gonna have people here and there being like, rude, but I got a lot more positivity. So I would say, to answer your question, the main turning point was me posting that photo with my story. But naturally, I just, you round up the courage, and I believe I influence other people to do that too, because I've seen like people not having the confidence, and they completely change in like a couple of years after knowing me.
Mm. And I would like to agree with you a lot of things that you said, and also add on some things, because when it comes to bullying, it's quite a different case, because I myself, I feel like the reason why I was always in my shell is the fact that I didn't actually have the sense of actually friendship, of actually keep on pursuing friends. Even in high school, it was quite hard. But after I started university, I told myself that I would make friends. And if you look at me now, people would say that I have a lot of friends. Everywhere I go, I greet whenever I come across a person. But my initial thing is that of bullying is something that, as much as it's spoken about, but is not spoken about, I would say people are not putting force onto it, because you can see other advocacies when it comes to mental health, when it comes to gender equality, things like that. But when it comes to policing, they don't understand how that actually affects a child when it comes to that. And I have some stats here before actually went to get into this call. I had a stats where it says that 1 out of every 5, which is 20.2% students report being bullied, which is the stats is from America back in 2019. And it's quite alarming, because some point that one can be bullied and not come out, and
Mhm.
because they were threatened that they will be beaten up again. So, to your own perspective, as someone that is big and advocate when it comes to mental health, when it comes to such conversations, what is your take on that when it comes to reaching out, of saying that no, this certain person is bullying me? How I need your assistance.
Yeah, so I actually want to go back to what you were saying, and like how bullying can affect somebody. So what I want to say about that is that when you are a child, up until, from my knowledge, it can be like 9 years old, 10 years old, your brain is still developing, and you are starting to have your sense of self. So if your brain is developing, remember your brain, up until you're 25, fun fact, your
Mm,
brain is, in the early stages of childhood, is it's a sponge. So everything that is coming in to like your brain is what your limiting your core beliefs are going to be. So when I was getting bullied, starting in third grade in school, I was called things such as annoying, stupid, weird. Those were the 3 things that I was called, and still today, as a 29-year-old, I just remember that so, like, it's very clear in my head. It never went to something that I forget, and I talk about this a lot. Like, those were the 3 words. So, when you constantly keep being told something, when you're a child and you don't have your sense of, like, who you are yet, you start
mm,
believing that this is who you are. And then if you don't have like friends that want to, stand up for you and be like, "Hey, stop calling this, Justine, like stupid and weird. Like that's not who she is." Like, and you don't have the proper support, you as a child are believing it. Like if you're not receiving the support or anyone standing up for you, you develop that belief, and then naturally, when you become like in middle school and high school, you start having issues such as self worth, and then this can also manifest into like relationship problems, or like for women, they may want to always want to get attention from guys, and they may do things that they would regret down the road. So when I was in high school, I was self-harming because of my core beliefs. I felt like I was just a waste of space. And so I developed like these strong emotions, which later on developed borderline personality disorder. And so people just need to understand that, like, if your kid is being bullied, take it so seriously. You know how they say that saying, which I totally disagree with, saying sticks and stones may break my bones, but words may never hurt me? That is so outdated.
Definitely,
That's
definitely.
exactly. It's like you think about that, like if a kid gets bullied, whatever, they're crying, but they don't get like beat up, right? The parents like, oh,
Mm,
sticks and stones may break my bones, but words may never hurt me. Be like, don't listen to them. Like, don't take it personal. Like they always say things like that, and they like invalidate how you actually are receiving that hate. It's like you need to validate people's feelings, and
mm,
it's everybody's also born differently. Like some people are more sensitive to hate than others. Some people can may handle it a bit better. There's actually even like science, like scientific like facts out there. Like some people are born with certain genes that are more sensitive, which
mm,
I was, because I'm sure there's been people out there who have been bullied, but um, can take a little bit better than I can. Like I remember when I was like in fourth grade, apparently my mom said I would come home crying every single day. And so, yeah. And then the bullying was really bad that I actually like left the school in fifth grade, and I had to switch to a new school because I was just getting tortured pretty much every single day. And I brought that anxiety to the next school. Like if I saw and these two like kids like talking in the corner, like I would just assume it's about me. If you
mm,
think about it, like at that time, I didn't really understand that type of anxiety, because when you're in fifth grade, you don't really think like that, right? And then later on, like as I'm learning and such, it's in a way, it's like a mild PTSD, kind of like, my therapist I had actually diagnosed me with CPTSD. So apparently being under a lot of stress and dealing with a lot of that throughout your whole life can develop CPTSD symptoms when you're an adult, which is, people don't know, is complex, post-traumatic stress disorder. So it's like a minor version of PTSD. Um, so just throwing that out there. But yeah, so if you have like, I don't know your target like audience, or but if you have like any mothers or, fathers or parents, like
mm,
just know that if your child is first coming to you, that takes a lot of courage to do that. Second, also just like pat yourself on the back, because that means that they know you're a safe place and you're doing an amazing job. So that's another thing. So if people who are listening and they don't know for sure if they're getting bullied, ask yourself how you feel. That's the biggest thing, is to be self-aware. And if someone's treating you a certain way, do you get anxiety? That's the thing, is to really identify how does your body feel, because your body is going to react if you're like the way I think about it is self-awareness is really, really big. And your body is the biggest like truth indicator if something is bothering you. Like if you feel shaking, if you feel like you're in fight or flight mode, or you're anxious, you know that this person's not good for you, and you know this person is treating you really bad. So just first identify, okay, you're being bullied. Now, about going and reaching out for help, I know that's the hardest thing, because some people may feel that they're weak, which they're not. They're not weak at all. It's true courage if you can realize, okay, I'm being bullied. Let me go and talk to somebody. And the thing is go to someone who's a safe place. I'm not saying go online and be like, yo, guys, I'm being bullied. Like
mm,
people are not going to do that. People have to kind of go through it privately before that they obviously go on the internet. Like if I was like
mm,
being bullied, like I'm not going to go on the internet and be like, guys, I'm being bullied. Like that's usually for at least for me, I have to be figure out what I'm going through first, and then I bring like my success story online. But I
mm,
also like talk a lot on like my mental health page, like my current struggles, which is like having bipolar and BPD. Um so yeah, I mean definitely find like a safe place. Depending on how old you are, I would say like a guidance counselor, like, go to a guidance counselor is probably the best, because, they know how to handle these situations if a child is being bullied. And also, they're working within the school, so they can try to find ways to, prevent this bullying and stop this bullying. And I'm really hoping schools are doing a little better of a job, because there's always like schools don't really do that. Like when I was in school, they didn't care.
Definitely,
Like
definitely.
they didn't. Like, I actually went to a Catholic school too, and it was a private Catholic school, and the bullying was bad. And then my mom was like, "Okay, when you bring this to the principal," because I don't believe we didn't even have a guy. We didn't have that resource, right? And so I was like, "Okay, we got to bring it to the principal." So it was me, my mom, my bully, and her mom, right? And out of having that whole meeting and everything, the principal pretty much called, like, not in call us directly, but pretty much thought we're a bunch of liars. And that, because I was also a new kid. I was a new kid. And
Mm,
this bully was her family was well respected in the community. So you know how that goes. It's like
mm,
I'm the problematic new girl, right?
yeah.
So yeah, so I really hope that things has changed a lot. Like I would say that was early 2000s when I was in grade school, but I can just hope that the schools are getting better with it, because people don't understand how serious bullying can really affect a person's
Mm,
development.
like as something that you said, and it really piqued my mind. And when it comes to to add on what the effects of bullying, I believe that some of the reason why there's huge suicide rates when it comes to teenagers, one of the factors is bullying. Because when you are bullied and your parents, not only your parents, but the people around the school don't believe you, most often your teacher doesn't believe you, you end up having no hope, and you keep on saying that have actually re- to saying those things that were said to you, saying that you're not worth it, you not succeed, things like that. And that goes with that your self-talk, and that self-talk most of the time, as much as sometimes it's positive, but whenever it is negative, you actually take it into heart and realize, oh flip, they're right. I am like the reason why I'm like this is the reason why I am like this is the fact that I can't defend myself. I'm not worth it. And it's something that I've seen, and that self-talk don't actually end within childhood. It goes with you. And whenever you try to do something good for yourself, and that voice comes back of saying you are not worth it. Funny thing, I yesterday I watched a movie, Voices. I'm not quite sure if are familiar with it. It the main actor is Ryan Reynolds, and funny thing that one the psychologist said to Ryan, where he actually was asking about the voices. He said that everyone has those voices. You are not the only one. I love the fact that you said you are not. You realize that you're not the only one, and actually having that advocacy of allowing people to say no. As much as we're feeling that like this, there's the other person that is actually feeling that. And going back to actually to my analogy when it comes to this movie, one thing I've realized the fact that sometimes we have these voices thinking that they are true, thinking that they actually have an impact on our lives. One thing that we can do is just shut them down. And as much as say those voices said to us, do that, commit, actually self harm, kill yourself. You end up saying you can actually shut them down and say that I'm not gonna do that. And
Mhm,
I understand that it's quite a hard thing to do, because sometimes one of the I believe that it's hard to actually say this, quiet down the voices. And I've been there. I wouldn't say that I've mastered it, and I'm still struggling with that. Actually, shutting down those voices and saying that no, let me focus on something else. And when it comes to, I've learned a lot about meditation. Try by any means to try to meditate, to try to actually be within myself, and actually saying that another thing that I've seen is the fact that in order for you to actually boost your confidence, boost yourself, is the fact that have a wall of your achievement and saying that, oh, flip, I did that. Every time you have that voice, you actually see your achievement. Oh, flip, I did that. So that doesn't mean that the thing that I'm saying to myself are not true. I rather be in the space of saying that to myself. No, flip. I've done this. So this is a lie, and these are just voices that want to actually control my life. So one of the things that I have realized, and how did your bipolar play a role within realizing in terms of when it came to bullying?
Yeah, so when it comes to, I was diagnosed with bipolar when I was 17 years old, and it was after an episode of self-harm. And the reason
Mm,
I had a severe episode of self-harm, and I usually always kind of feel a little bit embarrassed, but I shouldn't feel embarrassed. But it was triggered by an ex-boyfriend betraying me and
mm,
dating this other woman. And the reason I had an episode was because I felt that I was not worthy. And it wasn't the first time it's happened to me. I've had other guys do the same thing to me. So I completely like lost it. And I've had multiple episodes of self-harm, and I noticed that they were always triggered when it had to, and it was attached to some type of, it was definitely being abandoned, being betrayed, being lied to. That's something I still struggle, like, with today. I don't, well, let me back up. I don't self-harm anymore, but
mm,
something that, I do struggle with is, like, being lied to. Like, that's one of my biggest pet peeves, and being betrayed, and I think it's because I dealt with that a lot growing up. I was betrayed so much. I was pushed to the side, abandoned, neglected. Um, so I would say that, I had a lot of, like, very, apparently the psychiatrist said that, self-harm can contribute to to have bipolar. And another fact about bipolar is that it's a gene, so meaning that, like, it ran in my family. There's no, like, diagnosis of it in my family, but I believe that my grandmother most likely did, based off of how my mom, describes, like, like, what she did when she was growing up. But back
mm,
in the day, mental health is very, 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 very stigmatized, like, she didn't go to therapy, she didn't, so that, she's not diagnosed, and also she's, unfortunately passed away, so we can never really find out. But based off of me, I guess in a way, kind of psychoanalyzing her, and the way my mom explains her, childhood growing up with my grandmother, I'm like, that is 100% pretty much bipolar. So I believe a gene went with her, and bipolar, just because you have the gene for bipolar doesn't necessarily mean you're gonna have bipolar.
mm,
It's triggered by an event, stress. And it makes sense that it was triggered for me because, if I mentioned my childhood bullying and how severe it was when I was in grade school. So I would believe that's what triggered my diagnosis. Um, and so I feel like that's kind of how they are, I guess, not working together. That kind of sounds a little weird. Uh, but in a way correlates. And outside of bipolar, I also have BPD, which is, borderline personality disorder. And that one apparently isn't a gene. That is something that is develops from childhood trauma. And if it's a personality disorder. So when you're so mistreated when you're younger and you can't develop a sense of self, you start developing this other type of personality that is considered, in the DSM abnormal. And then people with borderline personality disorder can also grab onto other people's personalities because they don't have that growing up. But one other thing that I wanted to talk about, you were speaking about, was the voices in your head. So honestly, when people are bullied a lot and you hear these voices in your head, they're coming from what you were told as a child, and that kind of goes back to your core beliefs. So if someone's saying to you, "Oh, you're worthless," or "Oh, you're stupid," or even not even having to say the word, but just feeling of being worthless, then you
mm,
start becoming your own bully. And today, I still struggle with that. I'm still my own bully. My therapist says to me, "You're your own worst enemy." In reality, we are our own worst enemy. And even though I'm not actively being bullied right now, which thankfully I'm not, I still kind of hold that in the back of my head. So I'm still working on that in therapy. But another thing I want to mention too is that we get thousands of thoughts every single day, thousands and thousands of thoughts. And so what I've learned is that just let those thoughts just pass through. They're like like clouds, you know? They're like clouds going into your mind, but the biggest thing is to don't entertain it. So I personally don't like to use the word, I guess, shut down because it's basically shut down in my head is like suppressing the emotion. It's just kind of, I guess, like, okay, recognizing, okay, it went through my head, but I'm not gonna entertain it. I'm not going to let it ruin my day. And just also just like just knowing that, as you were saying, that it's not who you are, it's just your mind trying to play tricks on you. And one thing that I'm really glad that you mentioned that I was actually gonna mention, but you already mentioned it, is that when you have like these thoughts of I'm a failure, you know, right? But then
Mm,
you
mm.
achieve something, right? And then you were like, I achieved this. That proves that I'm not a failure, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
that's kinda how I'm like, okay, if I feel like I'm ugly or something like that, that was something that I was called. I'm like, I have a loving boyfriend. He thinks I'm
Mm, mm,
beautiful, right?
mm,
And so
mm,
that's just like you gotta have to put, you know, you have an opinion and then you have facts. You gotta really focus more on the facts. But another thing too is that it's definitely a great exercise to, you know, to help us get through those, you know, negative thoughts. But then also on the side, we really have to work on Re I was gonna say changing core beliefs, but actually my therapist said that that's actually not physically possible because your core beliefs are embedded into your brain, just like if you were, like on a sidewalk, you know how they're putting like cement, and if you
mm,
put your hand in it, that's how she described it. So even though core beliefs is fully never gonna leave your brain because it was developed at a young age, you can still develop beliefs over it to overpower
mm,
that. You know what I mean? So
mm.
that's kind of like
Definitely,
the
definitely.
yeah, exactly. So it's just also just being at peace with it. And then also knowing that it's not your fault. This happens, you know, this
Mm,
happened to you as a child, but it's also now, you know, of course, your responsibility to not let it follow you. And that happens with some people is that they can have two options. Like if I let like that follow me feeling worthless, feeling ugly, this I would just be drinking myself to death. You know what I mean?
mm,
Like
mm, mm,
doing drugs or this and that, but I chose I'm like, I'm not gonna go down that route. So I went down this route where I'm helping other people. So, you know, even though trauma sucks and what I went through sucks, I try to think of it in a way where I'm like, you know, turning my pain into purpose, where I'm helping people. And I just want to be like that, I guess, big sister or person that I needed as a as a child. But yeah, so that's kind of like I wanted to go back to what you were saying. 'Cause I wanted to,
mm.
you know, give my 2 cents on that.
Thank you so much for that. And it would be bad for me to actually take credit of that because it was said by Brad Miners. It's some guy that a guy that I had on a podcast. Whereas we spoke about in terms of improvement, in terms of actually making yourself in a way of not giving up, actually having that endurance of changing the mindset. And it's something that again some powerful thing that you mentioned. It's not your fault. And always we have this perception that it's our fault
Mhm,
and we could do more. We could have done that and that and that. And most of the time we always are stuck at the past, not actually realizing that the most important thing is the present, not the past, not the future, but the present. What are you doing now to actually change your situation? That's
mhm,
how I am. And in a way of as much as I was bullied back in primary school. Oh, sorry, not primary school. Actually, it was primary school. Yeah, it was primary school. And but that doesn't actually define me. And
mhm,
sometimes we allow these things to define ourselves, and we ended up actually putting labels on it. I love the fact that I have a laptop bag, my laptop bag, where it says that we don't believe in labels. And most of the time, we actually go to labels. I'm not this because of this. And we label ourselves when it comes to failure, not realizing that at some point in our lives, we need failure. And what are you doing through that failure to actually improve yourself? It's something that is quite hard for ourselves to actually say. As much as I was bullied, what is the next step forward? Of not actually realizing that it's not the end of the world. This too shall pass. It's a quote that I heard from who was it? I forgot the actor, but he said that this too shall pass,
mhm,
whether it's good, whether it's bad, because
mhm,
nothing lasts forever. One thing
Yeah.
that I'm quite sure. And you mentioned gratitude, and gratitude is something that we always fail to actually recognize. We always fail to actually say, "Oh, flip! I'm gratitude for this thing. I'm gratitude for my family. I get gratitude for my girlfriend or boyfriend, things like that, and those small things." Because at some point that we actually shut down those small wins of say that it's not enough, I need to do more. And one thing that I realize about people that have been through trauma is the fact that they're always consistently working, even though they achieve this certain thing, this small thing, they say,
Mhm.
nah, it's not enough. I'm going. Even if they celebrate, probably it's an hour, 30 minutes now, it's time to go to work. Same thing with me. I always do that in terms of not actually staying in that and that thing of saying that of let me not actually stay in this win. Let not me savor this moment of winning, savor this moment of success, because I know that at some point that it will always I can do more. And it's a mentality that I believe that we all should actually not invest ourselves into, because at some point that it's something that actually gives us, whenever we have reached that success, it gives us that little bit of dopamine. And
Mhm.
when we want more and more and more, it's something that Dr. Huberman said on the on an episode he did with Stephen Bartlett a month ago, where he said that the more, when it comes to trauma, the more you seek that dopamine, you reach
Mhm.
it, and when it goes down, you crash down, and you will still have want that same energy to actually achieve again that dopamine whenever. But as well as when you reach down, you're unable to actually gain that energy, because you used an excessive amount of energy to actually reach that dopamine. And I believe that that's one of the reasons why there are there's this thing of mental health problems, whereas children end up, as I spoke on about suicide. There's high amount of suicide. Speaking about in terms of this high rate of depression, as I look at Gen Z, and one thing that I realize is the fact that as much as it's a generation that is more aware about mental health, but at the same time, it's a generation where it has the most suicide rates ever. And it really alarming. And to in terms of, as I'm seeing, we almost out of time towards that. What is your view on that in terms of Gen Z when it comes to mental health and when it comes to bullying?
Yeah, so when you mentioned that with Gen Z, like their generation that is like more open about mental health, and you're absolutely correct on that. And then there's Gen Z that has like the highest rate of suicide. So my take on that is everyone's different in the actual generation. So the difference of Gen Z and like millennials is that Gen Z, all they know is the internet. All they know is social media. So that's
Mm,
the biggest thing, is that there's a lot of studies out there that social media is pretty much um, I guess I guess in a way kind of like killing people in a way. I mean, I actually personally don't believe that it's just social media.
mm,
Yes, social media can be toxic. And if, when we were young, getting bullied in person, imagine how hard that would be for Gen Z getting bullied on the internet.
mm,
Like if especially if they, let's say they have a lot of following. Like, sometimes there's some, like, little Gen Z influencers. Actually, Gen Z
mm.
is not even that, like, young like they used to be. What am I saying? They're, like, adults now. So, I was, like, here thinking in my head that, like, Gen Z are, like, I'm thinking of Gen Alpha by accident, but Gen Z, yeah, no, Gen Z is one of, like, a Gen Z is only a couple years younger than me, so what am I saying? But yeah, that's my point there too, is that Gen Z also just knows, like, with influencers and YouTubers, so they let's a lot of Gen Zers are TikTokers and influencers and such, so
Mm,
they get a lot of hate, right? They get a lot of hate,
mm,
and so they have to deal with bullying on a bigger scale of people saying, "Oh, go kill yourself. Oh, go do this, go do that." So they have, in reality, they do have it a lot worse when it comes to bullying, because if they're, still in school, well, they're probably like in college or out of college by now, but um, they just have
mm,
more of it, I guess, on a bigger scale. So I would say that can drive people into suicide. And then for Gen Z, they are more open because of the influence of it. So people are on social media doing what we're doing, having podcasts about mental health. They're going to be influenced by wanting to do the same thing and wanting to talk about it and feeling that it's a safe thing to do. While in millennials, we grew up partially like in high school, like people would think you're like annoying if you talk about your mental health and mental illness
mm,
is real, it's
mm,
all in your head. Like, you know what I mean? Because we're also
mm,
raised by baby boomers and they didn't believe in any of that. So you're kind of also thinking about like who you're raised by. So I would say that Gen Z kind of like they've all they knew was, like, really social media. Millennials at least had a little bit of both. Like, I grew up with just being, like, a regular kid, not having, like, access to, like, social media. I mean, I was on social media, but it wasn't like it is today, you know?
mm, mm,
Like, today, it's so different. Like, I remember, like, when I was on My I was, like, literally on MySpace. You know, do you know what MySpace is? Yeah, like
yeah.
remember those MySpace days? Like, all but then again, if you think about it, that kinda caused a little, drama with the top 5 friends.
Yeah, yeah.
So I guess just kinda thinking about it, we had our own little drama, but it yeah, but that was that's obviously way different than what it is today, but oh my god, the drama of that, and then, like, if someone was in your top 5, like, "Oh, you're really not my friend," or just, oh my
Yeah, yeah.
so it was kinda like drama with, like, your intermediate, like, in real life friends, right? You would, of
Mm,
course, have some online friends, but it would be considered rare to have an
mm,
online friend. And then so then we go into, Facebook, and then Facebook is really just, like, posting statuses, and I literally look at On This Day all the time, and, like, 14 years ago, I'm complaining about something, like, being such a rowdy teenager, and I look at, like, myself, and I'm like, "Why would I say that?" Like, so that was like a whole other drama right there. And then do you ever remember when we were poking people? Remember
yeah,
poking?
yeah. I remember that.
So it was like, social media was fun. And it was the
Uh,
difference then and the difference now is that now you're connecting people from like all over the world, right? Like
yeah,
you and I. Like, I mean, we found each other on Podmatch, but I'm sure after this we'll like follow each other on social media. But that's the internet, you
definitely.
know? So but yeah, so that was like our time. Then let's go to Instagram now. Instagram 20 I don't know, 2011 or whatever. 2010, 2011. It was just like it was literally like Instagram Insta photo. So you would just take a photo like of your food or whatever, or like a selfie or like a peace sign. You're like, oh, I'm here now. And it's like right then and there. Right. And then now it's like, okay, I gotta do my content calendar. I gotta plan out my photo shoot. I gotta
Mm,
plan out like
mm,
my copy,
mm,
what collab I'm gonna be doing. Like, oh, look at my analytics. So, oh, if I'm losing followers, I'm not worthy. Like, yeah,
mm.
very, very different. So as I was going through all social media platforms, you can see such a difference.
Friends,
And
yeah.
just kind of like and Gen Z, like I mean, Gen Z is can literally start at like 1997. I'm a 1995 baby. So 1997, they were still like on Facebook, but not really much of MySpace. So they kind of skipped that era. And
Yeah.
so I would say what really changed was I guess 2014, 2015 was kind of more like when influencers were starting. So I would say like I guess later in Gen Z time was kind of like when they hopped onto social media, it was like influencers and get ready with me and makeup tutorials. So they kind of had that world and they kind of jumped in on social media when it wasn't just like having fun with your pals. It was more like seeing how I can do my makeup. And so just two different worlds. But anyway, I think I'm getting a little bit off topic. And I think I like completely forgot the question at this point. But I think, yeah, I think answering is just like Gen Z kind of didn't have a little bit of a break like millennials had. So naturally, if they spend pretty much majority of their life on the internet, that's all they know, and they receive more of that pain, it's gonna push you to suicide. Yeah.
Mm. And the reason why I asked this question recently, I watched a documentary based on Gen Z when it comes to mental health.
Mhm.
And in all honesty, the reason why I actually watched the documentary because Williamson was so not Alex, Chris Williamson was there at that part of the documentary, whereas they spoke about Gen Z. And I believe that they really portray it so well, the fact that the main focus was internet. And
Mhm.
as much as we talk about mental health, but at the same time, at the back in our rooms, we actually have this thing of I don't talk to anyone. I just actually have as much as sometimes things that are meant to actually heal that thing, they actually overdo it, and whereas they misinterpret things. For example, stoicism, they actually use stoicism to a different kind of stoicism of actually most of the time men when as they actually don't talk about their problems, and
Mhm.
where and ends up there those rates that I spoke about, suicide rates pump up, especially kids. And for example, even having good role models, that is something that is quite difficult nowadays because they people like imitate and saying that in terms of teachings in a way as much as I respect him, but his teaching I'm don't go well with it with them. And it really is something that I've seen that nowadays kids are actually receiving wrong messages of improvement, of saying that you shouldn't do that, you shouldn't care about other people, you should care about yourself, and don't allow other people to treat the way as much as it's actually good to not allowing people to treat the way you are, but the way that you shouldn't allow people to treat you bad, but at the same time try by any means to be kind. And there, there's really rare people that say that actually talk about kindness and being
Mhm.
kind to the other person, because you never know how what the other person is going through, things like that. And I just want to say thank you so much for being here. Really
Yeah.
appreciate your time, really enjoyed this conversation. It really went in a way the way I planned it to go, but at the same time
Mhm.
I had some questioning, and I had a whole page of questions. But fortunately it was a conversation that was flowing, a conversation was that was organic. All the questions that I asked here were actually part of the conversation, wasn't part of what actually prepared in advance. So again, thank you so much for this organic conversation. Really appreciate your time, and just keep doing the work that you are doing, because when it comes to mental health advocates, most of the time what I've seen that people actually want to benefit in a way, because they do it as a job, not as do it as a servant in a way of doing volunteering it. For example, I'm doing this for free. In a way, I'm doing in overall I'm doing this for free, and I don't have sponsors, I don't have anything, but actually genuine have the drive of actually talking about mental health in every
Mhm.
aspect of it. So again, thank you so much for the work that you're doing.